In testimony before the Senate Judiciary Committee this week, FBI Director Christopher Wray warned that the possibility of terrorist threats against the United States has reached its highest level in years following the October 7th attack against Israel. This comes at a time as Republicans in both chambers of Congress are attempting to resolve this issue by forcing the Biden administration to seal the southern border, at least change their policies. Joining me now to discuss this is Chad Wolf. He was the former acting secretary for the Department of Homeland Security and now chairman of the Center of Homeland Security and Immigration at the American First Policy Institute. Chad, welcome back to the program. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you as well.
So your reaction to the FBI director's testimony yesterday?
Yeah, well, this is similar to testimony that Director Wray gave probably about 2 weeks ago, also talking about the rise in the number of threats that he sees across the board. And it's not just of what's going on in Israel and with Hamas, but obviously we got to look at what's going on in Afghanistan and the consequences of that chaotic withdrawal 2 years ago. We got to look at what's going on the southern border, and there's a number in the CCP, and so there's a number of threats. And I think that for one manner or another, they're all converging now. And I think the director's right, where he's seen just a multitude, the highest number of threats that we've really seen since 9/11. And so I don't think it's a coincidence, and it's not happenstance that this all occurs on President Biden's watch. The leadership or lack of leadership overseas is starting to reverberate now here in the homeland.
So, Mr. Secretary, let me ask you this question. One of the issues that the Republicans are saying we want in exchange for any additional funding to Ukraine is to secure the southern border. But we don't see any movement on behalf of the Biden administration to say, yeah, okay, I get it. We've got the FBI director admitting that we have a problem there, that's a part of the threat to America, but yet they're refusing to make any movements.
It's really remarkable that they don't look at that southern border and see the images, right? We have 10,000 2 days ago come across that border, 12,000 in the last 24 hours, that they don't look at that border and say it's an absolute disaster. We need to change course. And look, we're open to having changes and some fundamental differences or changes to law so that we can manage this border better. They don't want to do any of it. Instead, they want Ukraine funding and some other funding, and they don't want to touch the border. They think what's occurring along the border is just fine. And it's just out of sync with most Americans, and it defies reality.
Chad, the director of the FBI yesterday using his testimony to push for reauthorization of FISA, the surveillance tools under Section 702, the ability for them to continue to use these tools. Now, I've had non-classified briefings on this, and I understand that they've been using this successfully, and there is a threat here. But there's also been a lot of misuse and abuse of their tools. And again, not willing to negotiate with Republicans and say, yes, we'll do this or we'll give up on this. They're just wanting it their way or it's the highway.
Yeah, it seems to be a little bit of a pattern here. I think what the FBI director should be acknowledging that, yes, it has been abused for some time, and we need to look at some reforms. And I think that's what you see from congressional Republicans. And there's been a number of pieces of legislation introduced that says, look, this is a useful authority if used the right way, but we've seen it abused, so we need to reform it. But as you indicate, they don't seem to be engaged in that back and forth to say, yeah, look, we agree with you. Let's reform it so that we can keep it as a law enforcement and intelligence tool, but use it the right way to protect Americans, not spy on them and do all these other things that they were doing. But again, it seems to be a pattern.
Now, Chad, I know you've been in this business for a long time. You're not having access to the current classified data, but based on trends, patterns that you see, weaknesses under the current administration, are you concerned that we might see something like what happened in Israel on October the 7th, as some of these sleeper cells in here may be activated soon?
Yeah, look, I think the risk is certainly high, not only from the inspired threats that I think Director Wray talked about, but when you have 1.8 million gotaways that come across the southern border in the last almost 3 years, you don't know who they are. and you see the number of CCP individuals coming over the border, 20,000 or more, you have to start asking yourself, what are those hidden threats? And so I think that we are at a higher risk than we have ever been since 9/11 because of some of the actions by this administration, the wide open southern border, the lack of leadership overseas. And you just see that with the amount of U.S. interest overseas being targeted and attacked almost on a daily basis. And so it's not a big leap to say some of that could start occurring here in the homeland. And look, we've got a robust law enforcement presence here. There's a lot of different ways that we're able to stop and disrupt, but that's not to say that we are able to catch everything.
Do you think the department, the Bureau in the Department of Justice has been distracted by the focus that they've placed on their political agenda of going after pro-life individuals? I mean, we've seen an escalation of the use of the FACE Act. We're going to talk about that a little bit later in the program. But it's like they've put a higher priority on going after their domestic political opponents than they have on protecting this country from real threats.
Well, there's no doubt, right? So whether you're targeting the Catholic Church, you're targeting, the pro-life movement and supporters and pregnancy centers and all of that. And I think most Americans look at that, and I certainly look at that and say, aren't your resources better spent elsewhere, actually tracking down perhaps terrorists and other individuals that want to do some really dire things here to Americans and to American communities? And then you look at the Department of Homeland Security, who to this very day will say the biggest threats to the homeland are climate change and white supremacists. And you just shake your head and say it's a divorce from reality. From everything that we're seeing in the news, that is not what most Americans are concerned about, and it's not what DHS law enforcement are concerned about. And so I think whether it's Department of Justice, DHS, or elsewhere, I think a lot of them, unfortunately, are putting in their political bias there to further an agenda, or not looking at the facts and the real threats.
So Chad Wolf, let me ask you this question, because you have a long career in serving in this field. How deep does that go? Is that just the political appointees and the political class? Once you get below that, you've got men and women who are committed and want to get the job done?
Well, it's certainly the political leadership of those departments, without a doubt. I saw it at DHS. There are some what we would call the administrative state, right? They also are referred to as the deep state. There are some there that are just not on board with certain agendas, and mainly from a Republican standpoint, right? And why is that? Because generally Republicans are for smaller government and less power in the hands of the federal government. And if you're a career bureaucrat, that cuts at your center of power. You want more control, right? And so there's always going to be that healthy tension, and we certainly saw it, or I would say tension. I'm not sure it's healthy. There's certainly that tension, and we saw it in the Trump administration to levels that we've never seen it before. Democrats, for the most part, the Biden administration, for the most part, doesn't see that. And they see individuals in career slots that are supportive of their agenda. And so, I think it does reverberate down into career individuals. I don't want to dismiss that the vast majority of career folks that work in these departments are patriotic Americans. They want to do the right thing. But like all individuals, they have bosses and supervisors, and they take their direction from people running these departments and agencies. And so they have to do their job at the end of the day.
Right, and this is another example. Elections have consequences. Chad Wolf, thanks so much for joining us. Always great to see you. Merry Christmas.
Thank you.